Hello, everyone, or good morning, and thanks for listening. So, I looked up Stepin Fetchit, Hollywood's first Black film star, and I believe this is where the term lazy Black people came from. Because what happens is white people, when they look at movies, that's how they depict Black people. So when they see movies and they kind of segregated themselves away from Black people, Black neighborhoods, they look at movies and they pretty much will use the movies to help stereotype or feed the stereotypes that they've already believed of Black people. And Stepin Fetchit was Hollywood's first. He was the first Black movie star, but for that distinction, Perry paid a heavy price. He is best known as the character of Stepin Fetchit, a befuddled, mumbling, shiftless fool. Seen through the modern lens, Perry's laziest man in the world character can be a painfully racist character. So Perry, a veteran of the vaudeville Chitlin circuit, got his break in Hollywood in 1927. And when he was cast in a silent film in Old Kentucky, according to the film historians Mel Watkins, Perry created the character to make himself stand out from the other characters vying for the role. So he acted as though he didn't know where he was, and he immediately got the attention of the producers and the directors of the film, says Watkins, author of the biography of Stepin Fetchit, The Life and Times of Lincoln Perry. He was chosen for the part on that basis, they didn't know what to think of him. They were astounded by him. So Watkins says that, like most Americans, he thought of Stepin Fetchit as a symbol of the negative side of African American experience. But in his research, he discovered Perry to be very different from his Stepin Fetchit character. So this is amazingly a complex man, intelligent, and he was anything but what people take him to be. And so these are him, pictures of him in character right here. And so some people who are much older white Americans probably remember seeing films like this called Stepin Fetchit. And he was featured in several films. He has a long track record too. He was in silent movies. And so there are characters that were in film that pretty much validated, or they made it look as though they validated the how Black people were or are. And so that has passed on from generation to generation. And if you have people that look at these movies, they've segregated themselves away from, back in that time, there were a lot of segregation where Black people lived virtually away from white people, and white people lived away from Black people. They didn't live in close quarters or close proximity. And so they pretty much didn't have a clue as to what Black African American or Black lifestyle or living, or how Black people, the way they think, or what their lives are like, their personal lives, because they've distanced themselves from people. And so that's where most of the stereotypes have been fed from, is movies and media. And so media plays a big role in some of the stereotypes that people will perpetuate from generation to generation. So he's just but one character. There are many other characters that they used in movies, that when a white person that has no knowledge, or somebody that is not a Black person, they see these movies, even today it still happens, where they see a movie and they think, oh, be in gangs, or they all must be criminals, or they all must be lazy. And so that's where they get this in their head, that Black people are lazy, and that's where you hear all the negative stereotypes. And so I also, now I took the liberty of looking at this young lady's channel and some of the comments that were put under her channel. And so I remember a while back, some people got into big feud with this one lady. And okay, I'm just going to say who she is. Um, I'm going to see if I can look her her page up. And I'm not gonna, you know, some people may know who she is. Okay, so I'm gonna see. So she has had I think she might have been on Tommy Sotomayor. She's had like a talk with Cynthia G. She's been on Instagram. And so there's been a lot of, talk about this young lady right here. Her name is Bernie Tree 66. And so she talks about growing up in white settlement, Texas. She talks about Black women destroying she entitled it Black Woman Destroys White Privilege Myth. And so she also has something where she says, that time I went to jail. And it's a lot of stuff that she has in her white privilege according to Black people. So basically, this woman right here, she will talk about all of the things that have to do with white people, not like as if that it's a myth. It doesn't exist. Like there's no such thing as white privilege. And so she basically speaks as if she's on the side of people who are white primarily, and she's totally against people who are Black. And the way she says things, it seems as though like what if you really look at this here, it says growing up in white settlement, Texas. So she's grown up primarily probably around a lot of white people. And so her environment is a whole different environment altogether. So she may have had some different experiences. So I will express that I have grown up in the beginning when I started out. I didn't always grow up around Black people. I grew up around all white people, but I have a totally different view of what she's saying. I don't agree with, because she's not being honest. And I'm just being honest about what I'm saying here. She's saying this because either her friends are white or her boyfriend is white or the people she's really close to is white and they probably see her videos. So she has to say things that appease to white people so that they can feel some kind of way like, oh, okay, here's a Black woman who validates there's no white privilege, which we know that throughout history there is been distinctions. It's not to say that white people alone have perpetuated that, but the government and systems in power have perpetuated the privilege of white people. And so that is what Bernie Tree 66 doesn't realize, is that a lot of the things that have kept Black people financially behind has been systems that are in power. And so a lot of, like I have done some videos in the past about, the war on the poor and people that have had social programs cut from them. And we know that not only people of color have participated in social programs, it's not only people, it's actually, you find a lot of more white people that participated in social programs. A lot of white people had participated in social programs in the 50s. And so that's the reason why a lot of them had received welfare or handouts or a leg up so that they can become homeowners and become financially stable and begin on their path of wealth building. And so that's what Bernie Tree 66 fails to realize. She doesn't speak on the issues of the systems that are in power. She just speaks on people alone and what she believes to be some of conduct by of Black people who just hate white people. And so what she says is there's lots of white people who dislike or don't have any dealings with Black people. And so, why is that? Because the systems and powers that they've always needed to be have pretty much catered to, you know, financial institutions, the schools, the opportunity for home ownership. There's a lot of things that she is not really on. And so I believe she lives in now, correct me if I'm wrong, she sounded as though she lived in a trailer park. So she's probably not, around. I'm just assuming that she's not really, she's still in the same situation where she's primarily around more white people. And maybe her boyfriend is white, maybe her closest friends are white. I have had people who I have had close relationships with, and as in terms of being like brother figure or sister figure that are white people. But even with them being white, as white people, they have stated that there is a such thing as white privilege. I don't think Bernie Tree 66 realizes that there are some white people that are more woke than she is. And so that's the differentiation on how some people view life based on their experiences or their lack of experience. And so that's the problem with her. So I took the liberty of clicking on Black Woman Destroys White Privilege because white people love to see this kind of stuff, especially if they dislike Black people. And so I'm not going to go over her video because it's probably going to say a lot of things that are going to rub people the wrong way. But I did scroll down and look at some of the comments. And there was one comment that I viewed and zeroed in on quickly. And so this woman, Bernie Tree 66, says that she's got 26,000 subscribers. Wow, thank you guys so much. And so that's her comment. And so I bet most of those subscribers are either white people who don't like Black people or white people who they expect Black people to be in a certain categorization, or they like her because of the fact that she says things against Black people, and that's what they like. And a lot of those people are feeding off of this, and so they are energized. It energizes and it beefs up some of the beliefs that they have that there's no such thing as a white privilege. Like they earned all of the. There's no such thing as it's redlining. There's no such thing as there was segregation and Jim Crow. There's no such thing as there was people who were financially handicapped where they kept them illiterate so that they can't wealth build. So basically she's saying that never existed is what she's saying. And so all of that is coupled with the white privilege and she doesn't realize that. So apparently she's like in a whole nother world, or she just wants white people to like give her a lot of likes and clicks and subscribe and listen to her madness. So here's the thing. And I've grown up around, went to school with white people, and I have known white people that I'm close to are white, and some of them have admittedly said, yes, there is a such thing as privilege based on the systems that are in power and classing people based on there's classism, there's racism, there's sexism, there's lots of isms. And so apparently Bernie Tree has not really did her homework. All she does is talk out of the side of her neck. And so I see where one white lady left a comment here, and it was in regards to what is going on, and I wanted to really focus on that. Okay, I'm a white woman. This is by a commenter, and she said, I've been harassed by cops when I lived in Tacoma, Washington. At least every month I'd get pulled over. And I finally quit driving there. I live in Arizona now, no problems. So don't say us whites have privilege. We don't. And so that is not true. So I'm actually disagreeing with that, because what Black people are saying is, we know that white people sometimes will have encounters with police officers. But see, what this woman fails to realize is that she has a greater opportunity of living and not getting shot by a police officer versus somebody that is of color. Usually what has happened is people of color, they don't just get harassed, they they could lose their lives simply on the basis that they're black people. And so this lady is one of many white people who believe that there's no such thing as white privilege, that they just earned everything. They went to school, they worked, that's how they achieved what they achieved. Do you know how many black people have worked hard, went to school, and they don't have the same opportunities as somebody else that isn't that is white? And so, and that is person of color usually has to do more struggling, or they have to prove themselves, or they have to do extra and above and beyond before they can get their foot even in the door in some instances. And so these are people who are in total denial of what has been going on. And so they want to believe that there's no such thing as white privilege when there's all kinds of documentation, books written about, and historical factual situations that point out white privilege. So now I'm going to click off Bernie Tree because she's apparently disillusioned to reality because she lives in a whole nother world. So she's basing all of her views on her world alone, how she lives. Even by me living in the beginning with white people, white neighborhood, growing around white kids, and then I switched and lived around black people, I saw the difference. I saw the difference. I saw how people were treated. And as an educator, going to different neighborhoods and different schools, you also see what money does when money is in schools and when money is not put in schools. There is a difference. There is no sameness in any of it. You see the difference. You see when people are discriminated against based on wealth, whether they have acquired wealth or they have no wealth at all and they're in poverty. You see that there are two dividing, there's a dividing line. You can see the differences. But when you just stay in your own little bubble and all you know is white people, then what is your mindset going to be? You can be a black person living around nothing but white people, and everything that seems to come easy, if it does or if it doesn't, there's always an excuse. Oh, maybe I didn't try hard enough. It's my fault. I didn't try hard enough, or something like that. But what they don't see is that you are not white, you're black. So even though you might have white friends, you grew up around white people, you're still going to get treated by others like all the other black people are treated. No matter how much education you acquire, you still got to prove yourself that you can become a homeowner and that you can achieve this and achieve that, versus your white counterpart. They may not have to go through as many steps. Well, now things have kind of changed a little bit because of the drug factor, because of opioids, because of poverty, because of money. Now classism is starting to be the biggest thing now, whether you have the haves and the have-nots. And with that comes more so people, you can be any race, any gender, any background. If you are wealthy and you can pay your way out of a situation, we've seen what happened with OJ. He could pay for the best lawyers and all of that. Of course, now we see what that ended up with. At the end of the day, he's still a black man. He distanced himself from black people and he lived in his white world, but look where it got him. And so it's the same thing. There are other people that have done that, distance themselves. They're in high seats. They have a lot of money. And so they live on the outskirts, or they live amongst white people. And so they talk as if they're white themselves. But what they don't realize is they haven't taken a long look in the mirror and realized, wake up. If you don't have any money, they're going to put you right back in the same category as they do all the other all the other black people. All the other white people are going to see you the way that they normally see black folks, the ones that are like that think in a racial way, because people have, even if they're not, there's different levels of people who are racist. Some people are not violent, but they have those pre-notions and things in their head, like I said about the Step It Fetch It movie, or if they have distanced themselves or they only live around certain groups of people that look like them, they only look at movies and they perceive it to be okay, that must be what kind of food they eat, that because they haven't learned other people's cultures, they only know their own. And so there's a level of ignorance, and I'm not saying ignorance as in so much just to say it as a negative. Sometimes it is a negative because they voluntarily want to be ignorant, but Black people, and so they don't want to live around you. They don't want their kids growing up around you. They pull their kids out and put them in private schools, or they move away from you. But see, Bernie Tree, I'm assuming that she's in an area where there are poor white people. And so she's probably in a situation where she's in a trailer park from what I saw last, and she's living around white people who are poor, and they, they might think differently than white people that have a lot of money, but there's still racism is still there. It's still there. It depends. So she's made a lot of friends, and so she's close to those people. And so she could never say anything bad about white people because her best friend, her neighbor is white, or her boyfriend is white, or some of the guys she's dated are white. Okay, she's entitled to her opinions just like me. But I can tell you honestly, to be really honest, it's just more than opinion for me. I have grown up around white people. I went to school with white people. I lived around white people, in the same house with white people. I have what you call an extended family member that is white, and so they have actually said they have some people in their family that are extremely racist, and they believe they're really militant about their beliefs in Black folks. And then there's some that are more liberalized, where they see that there's been some classism, some racism issues, and they talk about it. And then there are some white people that will admittedly say, yes, there has been a system in place. And that's not necessarily to say that all white people agree with that. And so that's the thing that Bernie Tree does not see. She doesn't see that because she's in a place where she maybe hadn't had to deal with it as much, or she didn't think about it. Maybe she's dealt with it, but didn't even see it as that, because in her mind, she's seeing something else. And so there's a lot of Black people like her that think that, oh, white people and Black people are more the enemy. You can be an enemy no matter what color you are. There are Black people who do mean things. There are white people who do mean things. There are other people from other backgrounds, genders that do mean things. But you can't evade the fact that there is a such thing as the racist agenda that has been pushed from way back when on up to now, and is still going on. And so it still happens, even within there's a lots of different things that are going on. So what she's talking about, that's a myth. Actually, it's not a myth. White privilege does exist when there's a government and state in power that has pretty much perpetuated it. And so let's see here. When we talk about Jim Crow is a system of white supremacy and whites having privileges over Blacks. And so Jim Crow laws is a law that was in the US, a former practice of segregating Black people in the US. That right there is a privilege that white people had. And so that busts that thing that she's talking about right here. Her title is Black Woman Destroys White Privilege Myth. No, I'm a Black woman destroying this Black woman's myth that white privilege doesn't exist, when it really did and still does today. Only thing is that today it's dressed up. And so here you have an implementation for straightening steel bars or bending rails by screw pressure. So that's something else. That's like another form of saying, okay, it has nothing to do with the race end of it. It's something different. It's like metal and whatnot. But Jim Crow really was Jim Crow laws. And so here, sometimes as in Florida, part of the state constitutions mandated the segregation of public schools, public places, public transportation, and the segregation of restrooms, restaurants, drinking fountains for whites and blacks. So you had to drink in certain fountains, you had to go to bathroom in certain places, live in certain neighborhoods, which that went on for a long time. Okay, let's go to redlining. Redlining is also a form of white privilege. Okay, and so redlining existed. Some Hispanics didn't even realize that till they started becoming homeowners in California and they saw some of the stuff written down that was still there. So redlining existed. And so what was that? A myth? Redlining's a myth? Jim Crow's a myth? This lady is clearly not really telling the truth. And so she's not being honest, and she basically is perpetuating something that is a denial of white people who don't want to be held accountable for these actions that have. And so right here, see, now there's different definitions. Now red line, see how it talks about a car is just like the other definition. It has nothing to do with the systems of things. But down here on number 2, it says to refuse a loan or insurance to someone because they live in an area deemed to be poor financial risk. And that has primarily been over the years, Black people or Hispanic people. And so a lot of times when they have gone to get loans or they've been tricked into getting loans that were from predatory lenders. And so we saw what happened in 2008 with that. So is she trying to say that that's a myth as well? So anyway, redlining here, it says a discriminatory practice in which banks, insurance companies, etc., refuse or limit loan mortgages, insurance within specific geographic areas, especially inner city neighborhoods. The origin of redlining, as banks, insurance companies, etc., had outlined such areas in a red on a map, letting you know that, okay, the whites live here, the Hispanics live here, and the blacks live here, and we don't want this person living in this neighborhood. And then sometimes you'd have realtors that would do a thing called steering. Steering existed. All of these things were set up for the privileges that white people could have to live in their own white neighborhoods and acquire wealth through home ownership and wealth building, and they got an advantage over that. And primarily one was when they had the GI Bill. And so, see, this woman, you have to not really listen to some of the stuff that she's spouting off, because, see, she's living in a place where she's primarily around people, either she's sleeping with somebody that's white. And so she has to say these things because she doesn't want to lose those connections with those individuals. And so she probably will see this video and come along and see it. And so some of these white people are feeding her little ego. Oh, you're so pretty, great video. Wow, man, she's so beautiful. Oh, the real privilege is money and all that. No, it isn't. It's now becoming that. It's now becoming where it's the haves and have-nots. We're starting to see a lot of that in this time, where you can be a Black person if you have a lot of money, you can pay your way through stuff, versus a Black person if they don't possess a lot of money and a lot of wealth, they can't get the same treatments. And so you can be treated like that. And so we've seen that. We've seen that on levels when I mentioned the OJ thing. And so police brutality, she's probably saying that doesn't exist. She's probably saying, oh, everybody gets hurt by the police. Everybody gets harassed by the police. Yeah, they get harassed. Harassing and shooting somebody on camera are two different things. In cold blood, getting shot. So Philando Castile, that didn't happen. So she's not really talking from what's really happening. She's just feeding this monster of what you call ignorance. and a naivety, and then people who just simply don't want to be held accountable for the things that have been that have pretty much catapulted their life, made things easy for them, so that they don't have to really fight as much as other people have. And some people simply don't like to share. They don't want other people to get ahead, because if other people get ahead, then they feel that they won't get a chance to get ahead. So that's what most of this was about, as well as greed, and people who just didn't want to share anything. They don't want to share wealth, and they just about stealing, killing, and lying, and deceiving people. And that's basically what it is. Now you've got people saying, oh, this lady is brilliant. So glad she said this. I wish more people like her could speak out. She said everything that needed to be said so concisely and to the point, and all this kind of stuff. And so she's getting brownie points for basically um, helping white people to validate their having to not feel some type of way because of all this stuff that has happened to Black people. They don't want to feel like they should be held accountable, or that they somehow, somebody in their family is help them catapult them to a lifestyle where they don't have to have the same struggles as somebody else that is not white. So that's basically what that's about. So I wouldn't really let that stuff get to me so much. But these things existed, redlining, and some places I've heard that some people said when they went in to buy a house, some of these things are still in contracts, and they've had to take them out. They've had to takes a long time for them to have to get rid of that stuff that they've written in some of these paperwork and stuff before people can own a home, that there were areas that you wouldn't believe that were redlining. And so these things existed. And so for her to say that white privilege is a myth, she's maybe on some kind of drugs, psychotic or psychedelic drugs, or she's just not being honest. She's really not, I believe, honestly, she's just not being honest, and she's just trying to feed the monster of ignorance, and she's not really being forthright and telling the truth. And there are white people that will say, yes, there has been people that have benefited from things, but it's the systems that are put in place. And so that's why I said, even you've heard people say that there's white media. They say things on TV that they want everybody to hear. And then when somebody of color comes on and says something different, your show is canceled. Your ratings go down, or somebody's wanting to take you off the air, or they got a problem with it, or they looking for something so they can say, oh, see that person, he had this and she had that problem. That's why we took him off the air. There was a show called The Rock. And not The Rock as the Rock that people know as the guy in movies that, he has the big muscles and he was like on WWE. But there was a guy called The Rock, a show that used to come on, a black bald guy. And he started saying a lot of things that were real political, that were really talking about Black issues. They cut his show off the air, and a lot of people were upset about that. And so there's been people who have attempted to use their opportunity to speak out, but they get silenced. And so I don't know if people remember, I might be telling my age, but there was a show that came on called The Rock, and he was a black guy. He was supposed to be a garbage man. He had a nice wife and family, and it was sort of like a sitcom that would come on, and he was comedic. It had some funny, but he had famous people that would go up. He always talked about real serious issues, and the more he got serious and started talking about the issues, that's when the show hit, a point where, boom, they wanted to cut the show off the air, and people were disappointed by that. And so people called in to the station, and that show never came back. It never came back. And so there was a time that they would show a lot of shows that were Black families, some things that were positive, shows like that, because I believe Black people, that were watching these shows, they were saying, why don't you show some characters of people who are doing something positive? I believe that's when the Cosby and The Different World and all those shows came on. But see, even though despite all the stuff that's going on with Cosby, Bill Cosby today, before all of this happened with him, I believe those shows, when they came on, they showed Black people in a more positive way, going to Spelman College and going to college and earning degrees and talking about life experiences. And you saw us in a more wholesome, family oriented, or where maybe we don't have a lot of money, but we're a family that's close knit and love one another. Not so much shows where people are living in the projects and they can't get it together. And, even though they did have a show, Good Times, people lived in the projects, but their family was very close knit. They would talk about social issues that a lot of it had to do with poverty. You know, there were even episodes where they would show people who were elderly, people who didn't have enough social security or money, and they would show issues where they were eating dog food or whatever. I remember that scene as a kid watching that, where the neighbor, they were afraid to eat her. She made a plate of something, meatloaf, and they were afraid to eat it because they thought it was dog food. Because, back in that time, I don't know if this is still happening, elderly people would eat dog food because that was all they could afford, because they weren't really getting a lot of money in their retirement. If you're a poor older person, you wasn't getting a lot in retirement and pay and all that. And so in order to stay alive and eat, they just go in the store and buy dog food or cat food and things like that, because it's still food. It may not be the best, but that's what some people were doing, were eating that. And so they did an episode on that. So apparently Bernie Tree is not, to me, she's not being honest, or she's pretty much lived in a situation where maybe she just doesn't understand. So there's people like her out there, and I don't really listen to everything they say and believe it wholeheartedly, because I believe their experience, they might be talking from an experience of what they had experienced. But see, I've lived around white people, and I've lived around Black people, and I've lived around Hispanic people, and I've lived around people who are not from, they from another country, you know. And so there's a lot of ways, a lot of different ways people see the world. And so apparently Bernie Tree doesn't get out that much. That's the way I'm going to end that. But anyway, with this being said, like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for listening.